समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Cut the clutter is staying on with Donald Trump, and not just because his appeal is so irresistible, although it is, but also because of the way he's approached these early days. I'd rather say the early hours because it's just about 48 hours gone. This phase of his presidency, he's approached it as batters would approach. I'm using a cricketing metaphor, a bunch of cricketing metaphors to describe American politics, but that liberty we can take in India. He's approaching this like the power play phase of a T20 match, like opening batter coming out in a T20 match, and he is hitting everything out of the park, which is the equivalent, or which translates into his signing this flurry of executive orders. Now, executive orders, this tells you that the American president has incredible powers. In India, for example, the Prime Minister himself will almost never, in fact, never sign any order. The Prime Minister will sign on a file which the cabinet has seen or which some aides have put up to him. There will be notes there, and then this will be translated into action, maybe under the signatures of an undersecretary or somebody on the staff. Right? That is how conventional systems work. American system is also a conventional system, but there in that convention, the president has a lot of executive powers. What Trump is doing in this case is he's redefining those powers. He's pushing at the boundaries, and he is in fact creating an entirely new set of powers. The result is that he is now beginning to look more and more like a king emperor, Basha Salamat, Maharaja Dhiraj, whatever you want to say. All languages have their own descriptions for that. But these actions make it look like America's got a king. Now, America is not supposed to have a kingship. The funny thing is, or in fact, the ironical thing is that the countries that have kings in the Western world, particularly, say, Britain has a king, but no power. So many European countries have kings, but no powers. The only countries in which the royalty has some powers or royalty has real powers, real executive powers, are countries in the Middle East or some like that. But in America, this was never the scheme of things. Article 2 of the American Constitution defines the powers of the executive branch, and the president says that the president is the chief executive, has all the powers. He's also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. However, different presidents have pushed at the boundaries of it. Last three presidents in particular, that is Biden, Trump 45 as he's called, and even before that, Obama as well. So they've been issuing executive orders and testing the boundaries. Many of these get challenged in the court. In the first Trump administration, many of these were successful, these challenges, because that court was not so conservative dominated. Now it's a different court. It's a conservative majority court. So we will see how this plays out. However, he's written this avalanche of orders. But besides these orders, see other things that have happened that indicate to his raising himself to a kind of kingship. And the fact is that in politics, in democracies in particular, anytime anybody sets a bad precedent, it is guaranteed that the precedent will become, obviously it's a precedent, will become the cause of an even worse action, which will then become a precedent for even worse to come going ahead. That is the cycle that plays out everywhere. In India, we say that BJP gave a Rajya Sabha seat to Justice Gogoi, but the BJP will turn around and say, but look at the Congress party. They made a former chief election commissioner a minister, made him a politician or minister, or Justice Badrul Islam joined the party. Similarly, Justice Ranganath Mishra, who retired in 1991 as Chief Justice of India, he was brought into Rajya Sabha and then appointed chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. So what one can do, the other one will do. More than that, that is what I mean when I say that one precedent will always lead to something worse. And I'm using this Indian example for ease of understanding in this case. Every time a precedent is set or liberties are taken, you have to realize that tomorrow somebody will come back and use this as the reason to do something similar. And for all you know, that somebody who comes in might be a lot more powerful than you. And that is exactly what's happened in the US. Now see what happened in the US within 8 hours. And I will share with you, see the screenshot on your screens. This is a newsletter from Axios. Axios is an American website. It's a column, in fact, it's a regular column called Behind the Curtains, written by Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen. And what do they say? They say in 8 hours, Biden and Trump, Biden as well, have both shown that the power of presidency now looks like the power of a king. And see what have they done. These two presidents, one outgoing, most of the stuff he's done in this case is on his last day, in fact, minutes before he handed over power, and also by his successor within the first hours of his taking over. And Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen in this column list three points. Number one, that the presidents have the power to preemptively pardon their family and their friends against accusations that they might face later for any crimes or any petty wrongdoing. And that is the reference to what Joe Biden has done about his family, and I'll give you details of his family. Number two, the presidents can now pardon violent criminals convicted of sedition and violence in defense of their own politics. That is what Trump has done. So 1,500 people involved in the siege of the Capitol on January 6, 2021. He's pardoned them in one go. In fact, if you go on to read the second part of this column, it says that there was a lot of discussion in the Trump group on how to do this, because each case would have had to go through a review, and that takes time. And at some point, Trump just said F.K it. That's what Trump said, and released them all. And that's what happened. Again, I will give you some details of the kind of people who got released. So that is the second one. The third one is that president and their families can now start businesses, even launch their own currency and profit from it without any restriction or outcry. And that's a reference to Trump and Melania, the first lady, launching their own cryptocurrency. And fourth, say Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen, all of this can be done with presumption of presidential immunity, which means even if I am doing something that's wrong, that will be seen as wrong tomorrow or illegal tomorrow, I will not be questioned because the president has immunity. There were some questions about it in the past, but subsequent Supreme Court judgments have now confirmed that immunity. So once you are president, you are like a king. You can do what you want. Of course, when your successor comes, his successor will do things, and maybe he will try and reverse what you've done. But while you are a king, like a Mughal Badshah or any Badshah or any Maharaja in any situation, you are the boss. You can make the law. And that is how Trump has approached his new presidency. This is the rise of an American king. It will be easy to blame Trump for whatever has happened, that he's acting like this. But see what Biden has done. See the people he pardoned. There were no cases against any of these. And this is after he had already pardoned his son, against whom there were serious cases and convictions. So he pardoned him. And now he pardoned his brothers, two brothers, James and Frank, his sister, Valerie Biden Owens, and his brother James's wife, Sarah Biden, and his sister Valerie's husband, John Owens. That is two brothers, a sister, and the spouses of two of them. All of them he pardoned for crimes that they haven't been accused of as yet. So this is a preemptive action for which they might be questioned by a vindictive Donald Trump. I'm pardoning them just now. As he has done that, Donald Trump actually condemns it, and he says it's a terrible thing. He should never have done this. What an awful thing. Just after that, he pardons these 1,500 Gen Sixers, as they might be called. So they all get pardoned. And in fact, these Trump pardons have also got many of the Republicans, traditional Republicans, also uneasy. There's a quote I see from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota. He says, and I quote, "We said all along that Biden opened the door on this. Biden carried out these pardons, and that just gave a dramatic impetus or spur for Donald Trump to pardon all these people together with that war cry pocket. Right? That's what he did. And among people who got pardoned was Enrique Tarrio. Enrique Tarrio is the leader of the fascist far-right group Proud Boys. There is the other fascist far-right group, that is Oath Keepers. Its leaders have also been freed. Enrique Tarrio got the strongest conviction. He was convicted for seditious conspiracy for organizing this entire siege of the capital from outside. And he was serving a 22-year jail sentence in a federal prison. He's been released, as are 14 other extremists of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers groups as well. They've all been released. Never mind the fact that many of them were charged with violent crime. In fact, if you look at Biden's pardon for his family members, he says pardon for all non-violent crimes, because he knows that they haven't done any violence, and he's worried there are obviously some vulnerabilities, some misconduct, or some wrongdoings at some place where he suspects a vindictive Trump administration could come after his family. So he's covered for all of them. And once again, as I said earlier, once you set a bad precedent, the other guy will follow it and will make it even worse. Both, however, are indicative of the same thing, the incredible power of an American president. Now, this was not always the case like that. If I read scholarly articles on this, it seems that the presidents successively, after Nixon, there was particularly a moderation of presidential powers, but for the past 20-25 years, it seems also that some of it might have come because of 9/11 and because of the urgency and popular support and the need and the public support for a decisive president, a decisive government. Presidents have been expanding their powers. Trump has taken it to another extreme. Now you see this cryptocurrency that Trump and Melania have launched, Dollar Trump, or Strump as I might call it, and Dollar Melania. Now this is something which is even worrying the cryptocurrency business, because cryptocurrency business has been scam ridden. They fought very hard to get some credibility back. Now if this happens, powerful people start launching cryptocurrency in their name, and that starts acquiring value, they have to start worrying. And in this case, it's the president himself and the president's wife, and they know that they cannot be questioned. Now, what exactly is happening in the US? How much power can Trump exercise? If you see the orders he's issued, there are many orders which can run afoul of the Constitution, particularly his order on denial of citizenship by birth. If you are born in America, no matter who your parents are, you get citizenship by birth. Now, that's a right enshrined in the US Constitution, in fact, in what is called as the 14th Amendment. This has also been challenged. This has also been tested in the Supreme Court in the past, and the Supreme Court has upheld this right. Now, why is Trump doing it? Does he think that he has so much power and his Supreme Court is now conservative dominated that he'll be able to swing this by the Supreme Court, or he will succeed in implementing it despite what the Constitution says, or he's doing it just for shock and awe? Already 22 states in the US, particularly Democratic run states, they have challenged this in their courts. But does it then mean that a fear factor comes in, particularly for immigrants? That look, he has now done it. There's an order. It's been challenged in court. Maybe the courts have struck it down, but this can always come back. So future immigrants will always have this concern. And then people will think, if I live in state A, my child might get citizenship by birthright. If I live in the other state, I won't. So this will have multiple consequences. One, some people will not go to certain states, particularly young couples who are planning to have a child, young immigrant couples who are planning to have a child. And second, within these states, particularly in liberal states, in the Democrat-run states, where this right might still be allowed, this could become an election issue, a political issue, because immigration and identity have now become very strong issues, particularly for the majority white population in America. So he may be playing at that as well. Now, I will recommend to you 3 readings. 2 are from 2023 in anticipation of Trump's rise, because Trump had been talking about redefining the presidency and redefining his executive powers. And that's how that Project 2025 was set up by Heritage Foundation, which sort of threatened to completely redefine the American system of governance. It was then disowned by the Trump campaign. They said they had nothing to do with it, but you can see that some of what that Project 2025 said is coming into action now. So the first thing you should read is an interview in New Yorker by Isaac Chotiner, and he has interviewed Noah Rosenblum, who's an assistant professor and legal historian at New York University School of Laws, who says that already, and this is 2023, and this is following a New York Times article that said, I will mention that article also, that said that Trump campaign is planning to redefine the president's powers. And Professor Rosenblum says in this case, and I quote, that Trump campaign is trying to put together legal plans that would make the presidency more into a kingship and bring it a little closer to realizing what he understands the office to be. He means Trump in this case. And then he talks at some length about the powers that Article 2 of the Constitution gives the American president. There's a line there which is quite unambiguous in Article 2. It says, the executive power shall be vested in the president of the US. And then it goes on to say that the president of the US, and I quote again, shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Now, this is very sweeping. The president could take any action, could issue any orders and say that, look, Constitution tells me that all laws should be faithfully executed. So I'm just doing this to make sure that such and such law is faithfully executed. And it is from there that this overwhelming power flows. Now, then it's up to a president to decide how much of this power they want to use. In fact, Biden used the method of executive orders so frequently that even the New York Times, which usually would be seen to be pro-Democrat and sympathetic to Democratic presidents, they also got impatient and they wrote in an editorial that these directives are a flawed substitute for legislation, and that while Biden is within his rights to prevent the blocking of his agenda, this is not the way to get around it. Once again, once you do it, remember that someone else will do it, maybe 3 times over, maybe 4 times over. In case of Donald Trump now, it looks like 20 times over. Now, why is Trump doing it? Where is Trump coming from? Why does he see his office, the American presidency, like a kingship or like a monarchy? So this Professor Rosenblum, he says that he has a threefold explanation. One, he says that Trump believes that bureaucrats who form the government system, the bureaucrats are essentially liberal people. So because they are essentially liberal and they constitute this deep state, he must deconstruct this deep state. You remember, you hear that expression very often in many contexts, deep state. Number two, too many agencies have been set up to fulfill social democratic and welfare goals like Environment Protection Agency, EPA, Social Security Administration, Office of Medicine and Medicaid Services, etc., etc. The third point, he says, is philosophical, that these agencies that this government has set up, that the US government has set up, these agencies are Congress's way of stealing the president's power, because these agencies, the Congress can control, and thereby these agencies take away executive power, which should be with the president. So all he's doing is restoring the president's power, as in his view was the intention of the founding fathers. Now, indications of this first came out in a July 18, 2023 story in the New York Times by Jonathan Swan, Charlie Savage, and Maggie Haberman. And that story said that Trump campaign is planning sweeping changes in the executive system, even thinking of criminally investigating Joe Biden, something that had been rendered impossible because post-Nixon and Watergate, reforms had been carried out in the US whereby Department of Justice had been given total freedom from White House. But Trump may want to restore that power of the White House over Department of Justice. You can think about some people in India who might be watching that situation very, very closely. Among the things discussed, and this comes out in Project 2025 also, among the things that comes out is also the US Fed's independence. Can the US Fed, which is their equivalent of the RBI, can they be independent of the Constitution, which means can they be independent of the president's power? How autonomous can they be? In fact, you can expect presidential intervention on the autonomy or freedom of the US Department of Justice. Because even in his inaugural speech, Trump said, and I quote his words, that vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. So let us watch that space very carefully.